All right, so in lieu of a Facebook Live video this week, we're just going to do a quick recording, and we'll be back live next week, I believe on Monday. Yeah, Monday. It'll be around 7 o'clock Eastern. We're going down to the Ace Cafe in Orlando with the Porsche Club region in Central Florida, and we're going to do a live data workshop. So you'll get an idea of when we come to your area and do a data workshop, what are the things we cover, what does the format look like, what kind of questions are asked. We try to keep it really light and interactive and more about enjoying our time together and less about diving into some stuff that's really deep in. But here today we're actually going to dive into some more complex topics. We're going to keep it really short though, and I'm trying to kind of break down what is Apex doing, Apex meaning the device, what is Apex doing while I'm driving. So we're going to go through 4 different things and discuss what each one of those are, and then talk a little bit about the friction circle over here that you see on the screen. So these are some really important fundamentals that are really good to know when you're using the Apex device, because fundamentally the device itself is showing you a grip-based metric, not just a lap time or predictive time-based metric. So this is an attempt to explain in as digestible terms as possible how that metric is being derived. And hopefully that will allow you as a user, a dealer, whatever your relationship is with us, hopefully this will allow you to use the product better. So this first one up here, number 1, raw measurement. All right, so we installed the Apex, now we're out on the track, we're driving around. So in the device, what's important to know is we've got some sensors, right? And if you've watched any of our videos or stuff before, you've probably heard these phrases. But it's important to know that in the device, it has sensors. So even though we're pairing with the phone, the device, the cellular device or the phone or the iPod or iPad, it is not using its own sensors to derive any of what we're going to talk about. That's what's really important about the Apex device, right? Your phone wasn't built to be a motorsports data logger. Apex Pro is, right? So the sensors, the 9-axis IMU and the 10 Hertz GPS, are in the circuit board on the device. All right? So that's what's important to know. Now, the 9-axis IMU, an IMU stands for inertial measurement unit. Think of it as measuring basically inertial measurements similar to what we're measuring over here with our friction circle, but in 9 axes. And by that, if you know what like a 3-axis CNC is, or a 5 or 7-axis router, axes are basically, it would kind of look like an asterisk in 2D, something like that, right? But it's kind of giving you more of a spherical measurement, right? There's more dimensions than just what's standard. So that gives us a lot of sensitivity, highly sensitive. All right, then we have a 10 Hertz GPS. So 10 Hertz means the number of samples per second. To give you an idea, the average smartphone is about 1 Hertz. That's standard. So it works really well for driving, at street speeds when you need like the refresh rate to be kind of standard, right? You might notice even using your phone on the interstate, right? It's only going to capture you every so often. You've especially noticed if you've used your cellular device or phone with just an app using the internal sensors, it's probably caught you, missed laps done or stuff like that. That's how you know it's a lower resolution GPS. So Hertz is just a frequency measurement, right? That's how often it's sampling. All right, so raw measurement, that's the first thing. Drive around the track, all these accelerations, these little nuances, things that you can barely even feel, sensitivity, that's where that comes into play. Apex is learning all of those measurements, it's recording them, right? And then 10 Hertz GPS, that means a high refresh rate on speed. So up to 200 miles an hour, basically, you're getting a really accurate picture of the speed. Number 2, adding data to the model. So the model is when we say artificial intelligence or machine learning, we're referring to the model. Now, what is the model? It's exactly like what it sounds. A model is like a simulation, right? It's when you build a model car, it's a representation of what the real one looks like. That's what this model is. This is the model that equates what the sensor measures, right, in this measurement to the real world. That's how we detect, a raw sensor measurement, and we compare it or make sense of it in the life that we as humans, the world that we as humans experience, right? That's why we call it artificial intelligence, because it's kind of bridging the gap. And without going into too much detail, it's basically fitting all of that data to an AI model. All right, so this AI model is what's taking these 9 axes of measurement, and it's going, okay, is the track going uphill or downhill here? Right? Does this measurement imply that the device popped off the mount and went up in the air, or is it more likely that the car is actually driving uphill? Right? That's what the AI model is doing. Now, when we come down here to number 3, all right, so that's number 2, so that's adding data to the model. So it's recorded, it's added to the model, and then number 3, it's modified and filtered. All right, modifying and filtering is really important. So that means we're filtering out noise from the sensors. So a lot of times raw sensors will produce a lot of noise, right? Noisy data, so irregularities. The data is filtered there, so that we're only getting useful data to fit to the model, not just all the data, right? And then when I say modify, that's taking this step 2 further, right? That's fitting it to that model, right, and applying it. So this is where we're going to move over to our visual representation over here. All right, so all these inputs, the model is kind of something that's going to look like this, but it's going to be a sphere instead of something 2-dimensional, right? So obviously, the acceleration that the car can achieve is affected by track conditions, not only car conditions, not only driving conditions. So the way that Apex actually learns the limit of your driving, like we always say, it's limited by what you show it. But the way it does that is that it's applying all these different measurements that it's taking. It's fitting it to this friction circle. All right, so on the friction circle, quick explanation. If you have seen one of these before, I apologize for reiterating, but I think this is important to always go back and revisit. All right, in the top part of the friction circle, so we've got lateral G, it's going to be across in this axis, and longitudinal G in this axis. All right, so accelerating is going to be positive longitudinal G. Braking is going to be negative longitudinal G. All right, we're looking at this very literally, so we've gotten over here. Plotting on this side, this hemisphere, it's going to be a right turn. Plotting on this hemisphere over here towards me is a left turn, okay? So it's not because I'm turning right, the load is going over here. This is being interpreted very literally. A right turn plots a point over here, all right? So we've got some limitations. Our acceleration, when we're accelerating, usually we're assuming kind of a normal, just street car. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's say a Corvette, 911, doesn't matter. 0.3 to 0.5 positive G is pretty plausible under acceleration. Deceleration, up to negative 1 G with street tires. We can go higher than that. Got some downforce, some racing slicks, negative 1.5. If you're going to the Rolex 24 this weekend, you see prototypes, might see more than 2 Gs under braking. Instantaneously, potentially even more than that, depending on the corner, the conditions, the grip level, all that kind of good stuff. All right, so as we drive, these are the things that are being applied to this model, right? These accelerations that I've plotted here. So as we're taking a right-hand corner and we're accelerating, a point gets plotted up here. All right, if you're accelerating close to the traction limit or you're accelerating in a lower gear, say second or third gear, you're probably going to plot a point out here. So that's if you're turning and accelerating. If you're just accelerating, it's going to be somewhere in here. Same thing, if we're just braking, it's going to be in here. Points plotted near the middle of the circle mean you're not using the edge of the tire. You're basically driving probably like you are on the street at this point, those kind of accelerations. All right? If you're at the far extremities, that's going to be extreme cornering, right? That's going to be extreme braking. The best way to look at one of these is just to look for the overall shape. When we see this curvature here, that means that there's acceleration left on the table, all right? That means that it's logical that we could probably achieve this. And a lot of times that is only achievable through higher corner entry speed or, in this case, because we're decelerating, this fit that we're seeing here means we're accelerating pretty well out of every corner. So what Apex is doing in the model, we're going back here to number 2, adding data to the model. It's building out something like this. Just imagine this, but with lots of different filters applied to it. So, obviously when the car is going downhill, the car is actually traveling downhill. Think of the front tires as driving off a cliff, right? They lose grip. All right, so you're not going to be able to achieve the same rate of acceleration driving down a hill. Driving uphill, you're going to be able to achieve more acceleration, right? Or the car is going to be loaded in different ways. So the grip limit changes depending on those conditions. It also changes on something that's very important here: speed. So Apex doesn't just build the model off of those sensor accelerations, the accelerometer or IMU measurements. It's also using the GPS. There are data systems out there that just use one or the other. All right, that's important to know. But Apex is using both of them. Okay, so obviously at higher speed, it's going to be easier, or it's going to be more plausible to load the car more aggressively, right? Higher speed means higher force, means higher momentum, higher inertia, all that kind of stuff, right? Makes sense? So we throw a car into a high-speed corner, relatively quick hands, load the car, the same movement at a slower speed will produce less G, all right? So that changes. The grip level changes with speed, all right? All these different things are input into that model. Now this model, the baseline, is basically just vehicle dynamics, right? It's just assuming things like we talked about, like if there's camber to the corner, the car has more potential to grip, right? The car has a higher threshold, a higher speed that could be carried, a higher grip limit through that corner. The only reason that it's able to work and that Apex is able to know, there's a couple of reasons, right? And it's because we have extreme sensitivity. We filter those measurements really, really well. So when I say extreme sensitivity, I'm talking about every little nuance in the car that you can't feel is being measured by accelerometers, right? Accelerometers are very, very sensitive. And the speed's being measured as well. Modifying and filtering, very important aspect of it, and you have to do it the right way. All right. When we get beyond that, that modified and filtered data is then displayed and logged. All right. So we know through the display on the device and then the information you see on your phone after the fact, we obviously know that that's what's going on there. But imagine Apex is doing all four of these things in rapid succession, thousands of times a second. Because computers can do that. Humans can't. Computers can't. All right? When you think about it in those terms, the whole, theory behind Apex, the whole idea that something that's a computer that's essentially just a piece of electronics with sensors in it can know more about the grip limit of the car than I can, makes a little more sense. Because it can. It's taking more measurements than we're able to iterate and compile and inject our own biases. I can't brake later here because, or not exactly always knowing where the limit of the tire is. You don't. This is going to have a really good idea. So hopefully this whole idea gets you kind of a step further in your understanding of the product, understanding of what it does. Would love your feedback. Would love to know if you want to go in more depth on this type of stuff. What Apex is essentially showing you, and I'll leave it with this, as we enter a corner or exit a corner, Apex is using all of this data, remember, in more dimensions than we're seeing here, and the red lights are usually going to be that right there. For relatively advanced drivers, we're usually leaving something on the table on corner entry. So that's why we're transitioning from pure cornering forces or pure deceleration forces to pure cornering forces. Right? So think of this as, halfway through the braking zone or your turning point to your apex, roughly. Right? That's where that's where I leave the most on the table. That's where most of us leave stuff on the table. That's usually where Apex is showing us. If we're not confident accelerating out of the corner, Apex is going to be showing us this. It's going to go, hey, you can't accelerate here, right? But you're only doing it here, even with that amount of steering and whatever else, whatever input you have. Now, Apex does show red on the straightaways, right? And that's because it has to do with gearing, which is a little bit different topic. But if it sees a max of 0.5, it doesn't understand that shift that you did, all of a sudden you lost your inertia and now you're only going to accelerate at 0.4 or 0.3 or some other number, and it's thinking you can achieve 0.5. All right? I think that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully that gets you a step further in your understanding of the product. Thank you very much. Again, join us. We're going to be Facebook Live next Monday, doing Motorsports Monday with a data acquisition or a data workshop, just kind of a conversation about data. I think that's it. We're heading to the Rolex 24. Stop by the Grassroots Motorsports Car Corral tent. That's right on the shore of Lake Lloyd, right in the middle of the track, near the infield as well, kind of right there in the middle. If you find a track map, you'll know where it is. Come see us there, and we hope to see you at the track soon.